This is what they cut from the Diddy documentary. What if the version you watched was never meant to be the full truth? Former Bad Boy insider Gene Deal is now claiming there are missing clips, interviews recorded, reactions captured, and moments filmed that never made the final cut. And here's where things get uncomfortable. One name keeps circling this story. 50 Cent. No denials. No explanations. Just silence. Gene Deal says certain parts were allegedly too sensitive to air, too damaging, too real. And when documentaries involve powerful legacies like Sean Diddy Combs, editing doesn't just mean trimming time, it means controlling memory. Ask yourself this: if nothing was hidden, why cut anything at all? Because in the music industry, truth doesn't disappear, it gets edited, and silence is strategy. So the real question isn't what was removed, it's who decided it couldn't be seen. Do you think documentaries show the truth or protect power? Comment UNCUT if the missing clips should be released. #50Cent #Gene Deal #Diddy #censored this #missing clips #hip hop documentary at 50 Cent at Diddy at Gene Deal. This is where the real story begins. The Diddy documentary that millions watched was supposed to be the truth. The final word. The official version of history, but what if that version was edited on purpose? According to former Bad Boy insider Gene Deal, the public never saw everything. Not because cameras weren't rolling, but because some moments were. Allegedly never allowed to air, and that changes everything. Because documentaries don't just show history, they decide history. Gene Deal claims there were interviews that went longer, statements that were stronger, reactions that were captured and then removed. If that's true, then what you watched wasn't a lie. It was a controlled version of the truth. Now pause here and ask yourself something important. Who controls a documentary when powerful names are involved? Because documentaries about hip-hop legends aren't made in isolation. They involve lawyers, networks, clearances, relationships, and sometimes pressure. That's why this story isn't just about missing clips. It's about who had the power to decide what the world could see. And this is where one familiar name starts floating around the conversation. Quietly, 50 Cent, not accused, not confirmed, just present. Fans notice something strange. No strong denials. No urgent clarifications. Just silence, and in the hip-hop industry, silence is never accidental. Gene Deal isn't claiming he leaked footage. He isn't presenting tapes. What he's doing is more dangerous. He's questioning the edit. Because once you question the edit, you question everything. Was the story softened to protect a legacy like Sean Diddy Combs? Were uncomfortable moments removed to keep the narrative clean? And if so, what else have we been conditioned not to see? This is why Part 1 matters. Because before we talk about censorship, before we talk about missing footage, we need to understand one thing clearly. In the music industry, access always comes with conditions, and when conditions exist, truth is negotiable. Do you believe documentaries show the full truth, or just what's approved? Comment truth or control #censored this #Gene Deal #Diddy #hip hop documentary at 50 Cent at Diddy at Gene Deal. This part makes people uncomfortable because when insiders talk, the industry listens. For years, Gene Deal stayed quiet. No interviews, no podcasts, no exposes, and that silence is exactly why his words matter now. Gene Deal wasn't an artist chasing clout. He wasn't an executive shaping headlines. He was security, the kind of person who stood close enough to power to see what cameras never caught. Backstage conversations, private reactions, moments that never made press releases, according to Gene Deal. The Diddy documentary didn't lie. It edited, and that distinction is critical. Because editing isn't about truth or lies. It's about control. Gene claims certain interviews were longer than what aired. Certain comments were toned down. Certain moments were removed entirely. Not because they were irrelevant, but because they were too sensitive. Now ask yourself this: why would a documentary remove moments that add depth? Unless depth threatens something. This is why Gene Deal's voice hits differently. He's not accusing anyone of crimes. He's not presenting leaked footage. He's doing something more dangerous. He's challenging the process, and once the process is questioned, the entire narrative becomes unstable. Here's what makes this explosive. Documentaries involving powerful figures like Diddy Combs are never simple productions. They involve legal teams, network approvals, brand protection, legacy management. Every frame is reviewed. Every line is weighed. Every risk is calculated. So when Gene Deal suggests that some footage didn't survive the edit, doesn't sound impossible. It sounds familiar. Now let's talk motive. Why speak now? Because time changes leverage. Gene Deal doesn't need access anymore. He doesn't need favors. He doesn't need protection. That freedom gives him something rare in this industry: the ability to speak without consequences. And that scares systems built on silence. Which brings us to the name people keep whispering, not loudly, but consistently. 50 Cent. No one is saying he ordered anything. No one is saying he censored footage. But here's why his name keeps appearing. 50 Cent understands media power. He's produced shows. He's negotiated networks. He knows exactly how stories change between filming and final cut. So when Gene Deal questions missing clips, fans naturally ask, who had the influence to shape the edit? That question alone is enough to create pressure. Because if one insider's voice was softened, how many others were too? And once that doubt exists, documentaries lose their authority. This is why Part 2 matters. Because Gene Deal represents every voice that was present, but never preserved. Security, assistants, drivers. People who saw everything and signed nothing. Their stories were never archived until now. Do insiders like Gene Deal deserve uncensored platforms? Comment YES or nitrogen monoxide hashtag Gene Deal hashtag censored this hashtag Diddy hashtag hip hop history at 50 Cent at Diddy. At Gene Deal, that's the word no documentary wants you to question. Because once you do, the entire story starts to wobble, according to claims circulating from former Bad Boy insider Gene Deal. The Diddy documentary didn't just edit for time, it allegedly edited for impact. And that distinction changes everything. Editing for time removes repetition. Editing for impact removes risk. Gene Deal suggests that certain interviews ran longer than what viewers saw. That some answers were more direct before being shortened. That reactions, pauses, looks, tension were captured on camera and then quietly removed. If true, those cuts didn't just remove minutes, they removed. Meaning, because documentaries aren't just about what people say, they're about how people respond when uncomfortable. Questions land and discomfort doesn't age well on screen. Now let's be clear, no raw footage has been publicly released. No unaired clips have surfaced online. Nothing has been officially confirmed by producers or networks. But here's why this story refuses to die. Because the pattern is familiar. When documentaries involve powerful, living figures like Diddy Combs, edits are rarely neutral. Legal teams review everything. Networks calculate backlash. Brands assess exposure. And when the cost of transparency feels higher than the benefit of truth, the scissors come out. This is where missing clips become more dangerous than controversial ones. A controversial clip sparks debate. A missing clip sparks mistrust. Viewers start asking, what else didn't we see? Who decided what stayed in and why? That doubt spreads fast, especially in hip-hop, a culture built on authenticity. Now zoom in on the most uncomfortable question of all. If those clips were cut, who benefited? Because cuts don't happen randomly. Someone always wins. Sometimes it's a network avoiding lawsuits. Sometimes it's a producer protecting access. Sometimes it's a legacy being preserved. And sometimes it's all three. This is why one name keeps floating around these conversations, not as an accusation, but as a symbol of media awareness. 50 Cent. No one has shown proof of interference. No one has produced emails or calls, but fans understand one thing. 50 Cent knows how documentaries work. He's been a subject. He's been a producer. He's seen how raw footage turns into final narratives. So when Gene Deal questions what was cut, audiences instinctively wonder, who had enough influence to shape the edit? That question alone is explosive, because if one voice was softened, others might have been too. And once viewers believe documentaries are curated for protection rather than truth, the authority of the entire format collapses. This is why missing clips matter more than leaked ones. Leaks can be dismissed. Missing pieces can't be disproven. They live in uncertainty, and uncertainty is where trust goes to die. Which brings us to the next layer of this story. Because cutting footage isn't always about censorship. Sometimes it's about strategy. If documentaries cut footage to protect legacies, would you still trust them? Comment why yes or nitrogen monoxide hashtag missing clips, hashtag censored this, hashtag Diddy, hashtag hip hop documentary. At 50 Cent, at Diddy, at Gene Deal. That's the part nobody wants to talk about. Because censorship doesn't always look like someone saying, cut this. Most of the time, it looks like something far cleaner. It looks like strategy in the modern music industry. Documentaries aren't just creative projects, they're negotiations. Negotiations between match producers and networks' legal teams and interest axis. And accountability, and when powerful legacies are involved. Those negotiations decide everything. This is why Gene Deal's claims hit such a nerve. Because if clips were removed, it doesn't automatically mean someone was exposed. It means someone was protected. And protection is the most common form of censorship. Let's break this down. When a documentary involves a figure like Sean Diddy Combs, every frame becomes high risk. One sentence can change public perception. One reaction can create years of speculation. So decisions get made, not publicly, not emotionally, but financially and legally. If a clip creates risk, it's labeled unnecessary. If a moment complicates a legacy, it's labeled off-topic. And just like that, it's gone. No scandal, no announcement, just absence. This is why many in the industry don't even call it censorship. They call it protecting the story. But protecting whose story? Because history only survives in the version that's shown. Now, here's where the conversation shifts. Why does 50 Cent keep coming up in these discussions? Not because there's proof he censored anything, but because he understands this system better than most artists. 50 Cent has lived on both sides of the camera. He knows how raw interviews turn into polished narratives. He knows how access disappears when stories get uncomfortable. So when fans see missing clips, they don't think conspiracy. They think media politics, and politics always involves compromise. This is why silence becomes powerful, because no one has to confirm censorship for it to exist. All it takes is the understanding that someone had the leverage to influence the edit, and in industries built on relationships, leverage is everywhere. Now let's talk about impact. When audiences realize documentaries might be shaped by strategy, trust erodes, not loudly, not immediately, but quietly. Viewers stop accepting conclusions. they question motivations. They search for what isn't there, and once people start watching for absence, no edit feels innocent again. This is the real fallout. Not outrage, skepticism. And skepticism is dangerous for any system that relies on belief, which is why Gene deals. Voice matters here. He represents the people who weren't part of negotiations, the people who didn't benefit from edits, the people whose proximity gave them perspective but no control. When someone like that suggests strategy over transparency, audiences listen because it feels plausible, and plausibility is enough to destabilize narratives. So we're left with a question that has no easy answer. Were clips cut to censor truth or to avoid chaos? Was it protection or manipulation? The industry would say strategy. The audience would say censorship. And the truth probably lives somewhere in between. But once that debate exists publicly, something irreversible happens. The edit loses authority. And when the edit loses authority, the audience gains power. Which brings us to the final turning point. Because once audiences stop trusting the edit, what happens next? Do you think protecting a legacy is the same as censorship? Comment strategy or censorship hashtag censored this hashtag media power hashtag hip hop documentary at 50 Cent at Diddy at Gene Deal in hip hop. That's never accidental. When most artists go quiet, it means fear. When executives go quiet, it means lawyers. But when 50 Cent goes quiet, it usually means control. Here's what people don't understand about 50 Cent. He doesn't rush into narratives. He doesn't deny unless denial benefits him. He doesn't explain unless explanation gives leverage. Instead, he lets stories breathe. Because breathing stories grow when Gene Deal's claims about missing Diddy documentary clips started spreading. Many expected 50 Cent to jump in immediately. A joke, a post, a dismissal. None of that happened, and that absence is exactly why people are paying attention. Because 50 Cent has a long history with industry politics, especially when it comes to power, legacy, and media narratives connected to Sean Diddy. Combs sows silence in this context. Isn't neutrality, it's positioning. 50 Cent understands something most people miss. The fastest way to lose control of a story is to touch it too early. Once you speak, you give journalists quotes. You give creators clips. You give the internet something to dissect. Silence forces everyone else to do the talking. And right now, their fans are speculating. Creators are connecting dots. Comment sections are writing entire narratives without a single word from him. That's not chaos. That's outsourcing amplification. Now ask yourself this. If there was absolutely nothing to this story, why not shut it down instantly? Why not laugh it off? Because laughing acknowledges relevance, and relevance is dangerous when you want a story to die quietly. 50 Cent has watched this happen too many times. He's seen artists rush to defend themselves and accidentally confirm suspicion. He's seen denials turn into contradictions. He's seen explanations become evidence, so instead, he does nothing, and doing nothing forces the industry to react without him. This is where psychology comes in. Silence creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates imagination. Imagination fills gaps faster than facts ever could. And once belief forms right or wrong, it reshapes reality. That's why his silence feels heavy, because it suggests patience. And patience implies confidence. Confidence that the story will reveal itself or collapse on its own without costing him anything. A no-risk position. If Gene Deal's claims fade, silence worked. If the conversation grows, silence looks strategic. If missing clips ever surface, silence looks prophetic. Every outcome favors restraint. Now consider the broader effect. When someone with 50 cents media experience refuses to engage, it sends a signal across the industry: don't rush, watch first. Let the audience decide. That's dangerous for systems built on controlling narratives. Because once the audience becomes the judge, power shifts. And power shifts don't need proof, they need participation, which is exactly what's happening. Now, people aren't waiting for confirmation. They're debating intent. They're questioning edits. They're rewatching documentaries with skepticism. And that skepticism doesn't go away. This is why Part 5 matters. Because it shows how inaction can be more influential than action. 50 Cent isn't censoring anything publicly. There's no evidence of that, but his silence is allowing a conversation about censorship to exist unchecked. And in media, unchecked conversations are the most powerful ones, which brings us to the final moment. Because this story no longer belongs to insiders, producers, or artists. It belongs to the audience. Is 50 Cent playing chess while the industry plays checkers? Comment chess or checkers number 50 Cent hashtag censored this hashtag media strategy. Hashtag hip hop politics at 50 Cent at Diddy at Gene Deal. This is where the power really shifts. Because this story was never just about missing clips. It was never just about Gene Deal. And it was never just about 50 Cent's silence. It was about belief. For decades, documentaries held authority in hip-hop culture. They were treated as the final word, the official version of history but once. Audiences start asking what was cut. That authority begins to crumble, and it doesn't come back. This is the real threat behind the phrase censored clips. Not exposure, not scandal, but distrust. When former insiders like Gene Deal question what made the final edit, viewers don't just doubt one documentary, they doubt the entire system that produces them. And systems built on trust collapse quietly. Now look at the bigger picture. Figures like Sean Diddy Combs represent legacy power, brands, history, influence. Figures like 50 Cent represent awareness, understanding how narratives are shaped and protected. But neither of them controls the most important factor anymore. The audience does. Viewers today don't just watch, they analyze. They replay interviews, they compare timelines. They notice what feels missing. And once enough people feel something is missing, belief shifts. Not because of proof, because of consensus. That's the endgame. When audiences stop believing the edit loses power. Documentaries become suggestions, not conclusions. Legacy becomes negotiable. And truth becomes decentralized. This is why silence, edits, and missing clips matter more now than ever before. Because hip-hop was built on raw expression, and anything that feels polished starts to feel suspicious. So what happens next? Not explosions. Adjustments, safer documentaries, more careful edits, tighter access. At the same time, independent platforms grow, unfiltered conversations spread. Insiders bypass gatekeepers. Culture adapts, but one thing is already lost: blind trust, and blind trust never returns. That's why this moment matters, not because something was proven, but because something was questioned. And once the audience learns to question the edit, they never stop. Do you think documentaries show truth or protect power? Comment UNCUT if the missing clips should be released. Like if you believe hip-hop needs raw honesty. Subscribe for more uncensored documentary breakdowns at 50 Cent at Diddy at Gene Deal censored this hashtag missing clips. Hashtag hip-hop documentary number 50 Cent. Hashtag Gene Deal, hashtag Diddy, hashtag Truth Fee said it.